He loses with Judge Chutkan. And the next step would be to take it to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia and make that case before them. Usually they assign a 3-judge panel to do it. And if Trump won, then it's all over. But if he lost, he could then say, well, let's have the whole circuit court look at it, all the judges. And he has the right to do that. And then if he loses again, he can take it to the Supreme Court. Well, all that, well within his rights, would take a lot of time. It would take months, and there's no way the case would be decided before the election. So what Jack Smith said was, let's just cut out the middleman. Let's cut out the whole Circuit Court of Appeals thing. Let's take this directly to the Supreme Court and tell them it's super, super urgent and they got to do it right now.
Welcome to the Debriefs, where we talk with the Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with Chief Political Correspondent Byron York. Byron, Hunter Biden made a rare public appearance. I actually don't think I'd ever heard his voice before, at least outside of an interview. And he forcefully defended his father and brought up, the sympathetic parts of his personal history. Do you think he made an effective case for himself there?
And he defied a subpoena from Congress.
That too.
It was a stunt. What had happened was the House committee, meaning House Republicans, House Oversight Committee, had issued a subpoena to him to come be interviewed on December 13th in a room at the Rayburn Building on Capitol Hill. So Hunter Biden says, no, I am only going to come if you have a big public hearing. I'm not going to come give some deposition which you like. I'm going to only come. I'll only come if you have a big public hearing. Now that's just not the way things operate. So time comes and Hunter Biden goes to the Capitol. He stands outside the Capitol. Actually, Representative Eric Swalwell, the Democrat, has arranged for him to have a little space to do this. And he holds a news conference. And he said, I am ready to testify before a full committee hearing, and I am here. And you think, no, he actually wasn't there. He was in front of some microphones by the Capitol. He wasn't where he was supposed to be, which is to be in a room being interviewed. So he defied the subpoena, there's no doubt about it. And he's in contempt of Congress. I'm saying that colloquially. He hasn't. But Republicans are going to pursue whether to hold him in contempt of Congress, because if you'll remember back when the January 6th committee was in operation, Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, two Trump figures, had defied subpoenas. They didn't show up when they were subpoenaed to testify, and the House voted them in contempt, referred the whole matter to the Justice Department, which took it very seriously, and indicted on criminal charges, both of them, for contempt of Congress.
Right.
We'll see what happens with Hunter Biden.
Do you think that maybe his offer to testify publicly might give the DOJ an out to not have to not say it's an apples to apples comparison?
I think his father being president of the United States is the
That might
most
help.
important part about it. But you're right; they could have some reason to do this. Just so people know, by the way, the reason that the House Republicans wanted to do it this way, there are really two ways to gather information on Capitol Hill. One is to have a big public hearing, and the other is to have what's called a private transcribed deposition. And we've all seen the big public hearings. Every member of the committee gets 5 minutes to talk, going back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. There's a lot of grandstanding, there's a lot of speechifying, there's a lot of gaslighting. I mean, there's just a bunch of just politics, right? They're very partisan exercises, and a lot of times we don't really find out anything new. Now, in a private transcribed deposition, both sides agree that they'll have 1 hour each to interview the witness. Their lawyers will do it. They'll develop lines of questioning, and hopefully they'll actually find out new information. What they do almost all the time is to have that deposition and then later have the public hearing, which is kind of a show reenacting some of the stuff that they learned in the deposition. And Republicans wanted to do it that way, and Hunter Biden said, no, I'm only going to do a public hearing. And the witness doesn't get to decide how it's going to work.
Right. And finally, on the other big DOJ situation with former President Donald Trump, his case on the election subversion indictment here in Washington, D.C. is set to begin on March 4th. And to avoid any delays, special counsel Jack Smith is now going all the way up to the Supreme Court to try to get an immunity situation solved.
Yeah.
So why do you think there's such a rush?
Well, there's such a rush because Jack Smith wants to try, convict, and imprison former President Trump before the election, before November 2024. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. Trump is a former president. We have never had a former president face criminal charges. He's saying that I'm being charged for things that happened while I was president, and I have immunity against those charges. That has never been adjudicated before by anybody. So the judge in the case, Judge Chutkan, U.S. District Judge, she takes this argument into consideration and rejects it. Okay, so he loses with Judge Chutkan. And the next step would be to take it to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia and make that case before them. Usually they assign a 3-judge panel to do it. And if Trump won, then it's all over. But if he lost, he could then say, well, let's have the whole circuit court look at it, all the judges. And he has the right to do that. And then if he loses again, he can take it to the Supreme Court. Well, all that, well within his rights, would take a lot of time. It would take months, and there's no way the case would be decided before the election. So what Jack Smith said was, let's just cut out the middleman. Let's cut out the whole Circuit Court of Appeals thing. Let's take this directly to the Supreme Court and tell them it's super, super urgent and they got to do it right now. And the interesting thing about the pleading that Jack Smith made was he said, you know, this is really important. We need to do this before the court's term ends, meaning like in spring, early summer of next year. And we've got to do it before the court's term ends. He never says, we have to do it before the election, which is the actual pressure that he is feeling. So it's all with the Supreme Court now. The Supreme Court could say, yes, you're right, this is so urgent, we're going to do a really quick decision on this, and hopefully Judge Chutkan can start the trial as she wants on March the 4th, or the court will say, this is very important, we don't think there's any reason to break normal procedure. It's valuable to us in the Supreme Court when the Circuit Court of Appeals considers it and we hear what they have to say, and we're just going to do this through the normal procedure. If they do that, no way this case is happening, the trial is happening before the election. If they do agree to speed everything up, maybe so.
Do you have any inclination as to what they might do?
I have no idea. They did agree to think about it. So what they did was they said, you know, you're right, we'll think about it. And they said to the Trump team, we want to hear your side of this. What's your argument? Tell us by December 20th. So that's pretty fast. So they've agreed to think about it. I think it would be very hard for the court to just say, forget about it. We're not even going to think about it. Sometimes they do that, but in this case, no. And the other thing to think about, this is a former president of the United States. It is a case which has never, ever been decided before, and there's no way the Supreme Court is not going to do it. The Supreme Court can't say, well, we'll just agree with what Judge Chutkan says. No, they're going to give their decision. They're going to lay down the law, literally, on this at some point.
Well, Byron, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You can get more reporting from Byron by signing up for his newsletter, Byron York's Daily Memo, at washingtonexaminer.com.